worked for large companies such as Google or Intel or Uber. What have you learned there while you were working at those companies?
Well, I particularly have learned how the privilege they have at being in those spaces and the types of people that they hire into those spaces aren't always the representation of the entire world, right? You can imagine they pick the best of the best in the world, and so there are limitations in how we think about building for folks that we don't see on our day-to-day, right? And so I've learned that there's a lot of bias in the way we design, but fortunately for these companies, they're a bit aware that there are some limitations in how they build products for the world, and so they tend to do a lot of user testing to make sure that they're mitigating against that bias. But even so, sometimes when we think about building for the rest of the world and making sure that we're doing good, sometimes that in itself limits us from building for the world, and it's really important that we are co-designing with others when we're building for what we think is helpful for other people. Yeah.
So you now advise companies in the field of user experience and inclusive design. What are some of the biggest challenges that companies face or what you see when you work with them?
Some of the biggest challenges that companies face is this idea that the idea that they had that was supposed to be great is going to end up being shelved or costing so much money to change in order to be more inclusive, right? A lot of people automatically think if I have to build something that works with a number of other people, that means more resources, that means more money. And so they also think that means more complications, but that's not necessarily true. A lot of the time when you're thinking about inclusiveness, you're actually thinking about making things simpler, right, for a large number of folks. And so being able to get that buy-in early on and helping them understand that this is actually going to help better their bottom line, that means create more reach for customers. That means getting more money in return back. So we really do think about the return on investment when we think about inclusive design. And I think a lot of times companies don't think that we're thinking about those terms, but very much it's important for us to make sure that we are hitting those bottom lines.
So what is your main advice for companies in meeting those challenges that you mentioned?
It would probably be to recognize that you're biased in the first place. It's really, really important for us not to think of bias as such a bad word, as if we are bad and don't have good empathy in our hearts. If we actually start considering that we really don't know a lot of things, there are gaps in our knowledge, you actually start to create opportunity to build for folks that you don't even see in your own prayer view. I talk a lot about the reverse scale of influence, and that means that when you do design and consider inclusive design for underrepresentation, it actually creates opportunities for even the privileged. And so it's really important that we are insatiably curious, that we do consider what it means to design with others who may not have that background, but how we can work together to actually produce things that are hopefully more inclusive in this world.